Okay, and welcome back, students who are taking financial accounting. And in the series of videos, we are working on the assigned homework problems from the digital study guide for Chapter 11. They're the Group B problems. Note, accounting is about understanding the concepts and applying that understanding to the situation at hand. If you get the application aspect wrong, that is one thing and is easily remedied by watching someone else work the problem. However, if you don't understand the concepts, that is a whole other thing. Watching a problem worked out will not help if you don't understand the underlying concepts. Go back and study the text material again and watch the theory videos. If you still don't understand the concepts, then either email or telephone an instructor to get help with that understanding. Okay, before I go any further, in the last video where I was working on problems 37 and 38, the first 5 minutes of the video I gave an explanation as to how I'm going to work through the rest of the problems for this particular chapter. So I'm just going to be real brief here and just say in summary that I'm going to put the solution here on the screen for you to see, and you can look at the solution in the solution manual. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to spend the 20-25 minutes actually working through the problem, because it is just a lot of rote stuff, it's just a lot of repetitious stuff that I don't need to spend the time and doing. So go back and watch the first 5 minutes of the previous video in order to see a more detailed explanation of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to pick up here with 11-39, and it says, again, prepare a statement of cash flows using the indirect method. In the previous video, right, for problems 37B and 38B, right, we're basically doing the same thing. We're creating a statement of cash flows using the indirect method, but the difference is how the data is presented. Okay. Now you're actually getting a comparative balance sheet and you're getting an income statement, whereas in the previous exercise, right, you were just given the pertinent information from your balance sheet and the different activities. And it was the same with the previous problem, right? The pertinent information from the balance sheet and the activities. So here you're actually, for this problem, you're actually being given the financial statements themselves, which means that as you create your statement of cash flows, you're going to have to, format them the correct way and look at the various individual activities and then calculate the amounts from the balance sheet and the income statement, which is when the previous two exercises, previous two problems, you were just, for the most part, being given that information. All right, it also says here it had no non-cash investing and financing transactions during 2014. During the year, supplies made no sales of land or equipment, no issuances of notes payable, no retirement of stock, and no treasury stock transactions. So doing the last two problems should have prepared you to, as far as what activities, information to actually start looking at. But I would this particular problem is much more akin to what is actually going to happen in the workplace, and this is what you should, if you can understand how to do this kind of a problem the way that the data is presented here, then you should be able to do the previous two exercises. They'd be just much more easier because you're actually being given the data in the previous two exercises, where in this one here you have to have a tendency to figure this stuff out. And if you can figure this stuff out, then it just being as a gimme, a given information, you should be able to recognize that. Right, so it says prepare the statement of cash flows using the indirect method, and how will what you learned in this problem help you evaluate an investment in the medical, right, supplies company. So here's the statement of cash flows, and real quick, make sure you have the right heading. I start out by putting, breaking out the different sections, and then I write in my net income, I write in this text, and I go down through all the different activities And again, these were in your checklist or your exhibit. If you've done enough of these, you can almost, it is a going down, like a checklist of activities that pertain to each particular, like your operating activity, your financing activity, and your investing activities. You go down through those activities and see if they apply to the data itself. Okay, right. So you're going to have to glean the information, as you go through from, all of this information here, right? So you start out with your net income of 67,800, and you put that on, get my pen, you put that on your statement of cash flows. Then you go down through, you look at things like your depreciation expense. Okay, yeah, I know that I have 4,600 of depreciation expense, so I put it on here. Then I look at, my accounts receivable, whether it increased or decreased. Right? In this case here, I come over and I look at my comparative balance sheet and I see, my accounts receivable from 2013 to 2014, that decreased by $1,800. Right? So my decrease in accounts receivable goes down as a positive $1,800. And remember to think in terms of cash, right? Whether an increase or decrease in that activity, what its resultant effect is on cash. Don't just mimic the activity, all right? I mean, yeah, you've been given enough at this point in time where you've seen where you've had a decrease in accounts receivable, and that should be a positive number. And you've had an an exercise where you had an increase in your accounts receivable, and you would see that that would be a negative number over here. But don't just go ahead and copy those directly from the book or the exercises. Think through the process, because you will come across an activity that's not on your list. And if you can't think through that process, then you're going to get that wrong. And quite frankly, from an accounting perspective, if this bottom line is wrong, and this is, this here statement of cash flows is worth 50 points, okay, well then you should lose all 50 points, even though you have the vast majority of this right, because this amount is wrong. Your statement of cash flows is just basically wrong. From an accounting perspective, your information has to be right. If you make a mistake here with one activity because you didn't know what to do, because you didn't have that activity as part of your list, then you don't understand the process, and you should fail you should fail the exam or whatever have you. In the workplace, you're not allowed, I mean, you can't have that. Now, sure, in the workplace, you have people double checking your work and things like this, okay? But just realize that your financial statements have to be correct. And so it's better to think through the process versus mimicking from and copying from the statements themselves. So go down through the rest of these, okay? And, you pick up the information as needed. Your acquisition of equipment, all right, has $9,000, all right. Notice that over here, for your equipment, you started out at 49.5 and you ended up at 53.9. Okay, so that's a difference of $4,400. Okay, and you have your depreciation expense of $4,600. You have to take into consideration the change in your net equipment and the effect of the depreciation in order to arrive at the amount for the acquisition of the equipment. Okay, and for the payment of dividends, right, you have $26,700 there. Well, remember, when it comes to dividends, you have to be looking at your retained earnings. So you have a difference in retained earnings, okay? So your net increase was 41,100, all right? And then you also have to add in your net income, okay? And the difference ends up being the 26,700, all right, which is the number that you end up using on your statement of cash flows. There was an exercise where I talked about this this issue specifically, actually going over, oops, I put it, um, where I actually worked through the numbers. It was an exercise on how to calculate the payment of dividends, or the acquisition of equipment, things like that. So it behooves you to go back and make sure that you did do those exercises, okay? Because if you did them, then you'd be able to, this is a cumulative, the way the chapter went is it shows you something, and if you do it and you remember it, it applies to the next one and the next one and the next one. If you didn't do the previous ones and you try to do this and you don't understand the way it works, then most likely you're going to get this here wrong. All right. So then, oops, wrong one, wrong way. It says here, how will what you learned in the problem help you evaluate investment in medical supplies? And the solution says, just looking at the balance sheet and the income statement does not give an accurate appraisal of the financial strength of a company. For example, the balance sheet reflects a modest increase of cash of only $600. Okay, right. So the increase in cash here is $600. This could cause some initial concern. However, looking at the statement of cash flows, one realizes that the supplies, called medical supplies, had net cash provided by operating activities of $69,000, right there. The modest increase in cash was due to the net cash provided by operating activities being used to invest in capital assets right here, right? And it reduced long-term debt, right? And so there was a payment of the note payable, and there was also a payment of dividends. Okay, so when you're looking at this and you're analyzing it, right? Yeah, you look at your cash and say, okay, here's my cash, but just because my cash increased by only $600, what does that mean? That doesn't mean much, okay? You create the statement of cash flows in order to be able to analyze the cash more effectively. When you look at the amount of cash that you received from the operating activities, you didn't get $600. You actually end up with $69,000. And then what did you do with that cash? Well, it's saying you went and invested in equipment, long-term assets, and it also says that you paid off some of your debt, and you also paid off dividends, and that's why you only have a $600 difference. $600 difference as a net increase in your cash. Okay, so and that's one of the purposes behind creating the statement of cash flows, is so that you can see more effectively, what you use your cash for. All right, now let's see here. Okay, it says here, next problem, and I'm going to do this one. I'll be able to squeeze this one into this video. All right, so it says prepare the statement of cash flows using the direct method. Right, the accounting records for the year ended September 30th, 2014, containing the following information, and notice these are all activities. So prepare the statement of cash flows from the year end. Use the direct method for the statement of cash flows from operating activities. So again, here's the solution. Pay attention to the date in the heading, and when you create this, now remember, the indirect method is different from the direct method as it mostly pertains to the operating activities. Okay, it's the way the information is presented. With the indirect method, you're taking the information from your balance sheet and your income statement, okay, and looking at increases and decreases of certain accounts, whereas with the direct method, you're looking at, and directly, you're looking at what cash, as an example, what cash goes to suppliers, what cash goes to employees, and that's what you're recording in your operating activity section. So the setup is pretty much the same. You put in the heading, you create the different sections, right, for operating, investing, and financing, and then when you have an increase or decrease in cash. But when you look at the operating activities now, instead of starting out with net income from your income statement, we're going to break it down by receipts and payments. So whatever we receive cash from, all right, and you glean that information from these transactions here, or you get them from your financial statements, right? The receipts go on here, and then you do the same thing for your suppliers in order to get the total cash provided by the operating activity. It's a different way of looking at the information. That's all it is, right? And then your investing activities and your financing activities, they stay, pretty much the same, and you generate the rest of your financial statement the same exact way, right? So really, there's not much to say more about this, other than, just, as you're looking for this data here, you're going to be just gleaning it from here, okay, from these activities. And again, you have the checklist of activities, and go down through that quote-unquote checklist, and also think about the effect on the cash as you record the amounts on your statement of cash flows. All right, so I'm going to end the video here, and I realize that I'm not going over a lot of this. All right, I'm not creating this right here in front of you, but I don't really need to spend all of that time. In doing all of the other assigned homework problems, you should have a feel for what you're supposed to be doing, and you've seen me do this stuff before, so you should be able to just start generating this information on your own. It's not that difficult. But if you still have a problem with it, like I said, go back and watch the theory videos, or contact an instructor either by email or by telephone, and we'll help you with the generation of it. Unfortunately, it does take a lot of time to do each one of these things. It can take a half an hour, 45 minutes if you don't know what you're doing. Somebody like me, even 25 minutes, I probably generate these statements in 15 minutes or so, and I'm handwriting them, okay? And then I have to consider that I have to type all of this stuff out and blah, blah, blah. So it will take me a half an hour, 45 minutes to generate a statement of cash flows. All right, so with that said, I believe I only have 2 more problems left, and hopefully I'll be able to cover those in the next video. So I'll see you then.